So to be successful in the stock market over the long term, whether you're a short-term trader or an investor, requires the same important thing. I'll explain what that is. Plus, I'll do my analysis of the markets. We'll figure out where stocks, commodities, and currencies are likely to go next week. And then finally, the day trade of the week. It's all coming up in this week's Stockscores Market Minutes. All right, so you want to be successful in the market. You want to be successful over the long term, consistently profitable. Well, in order to do that requires a little more than luck. You see, one of the things that will really set you apart and make you consistently profitable is to have an edge. And what do I mean by that? You need something that separates you from the crowd, something that gives you an advantage. Now, an obvious edge would be to have better information than others. Let's say you were someone in a law office that saw all the mergers and acquisitions coming through for big Wall Street companies. That would give you inside information that would give you an edge. Now, of course, trading on that information would be illegal, but there's other edges. By being a small investor or a smaller trader relative to, a large hedge fund or large institutional investor, that actually gives you an advantage because you can be a lot more nimble. However, you still need more than that to have an edge. It could be that you've got a great strategy that you've researched well and that works with the amount of capital that you have. It could be that you have better tools than most people. Maybe you've created your own tools. That's what I've done. I've gone out and created my own indicators and strategies and processes so that I can be ahead of the crowd and not chasing the crowd. Whatever your edge is, you need to figure it out and make sure that you exploit it as much as possible. Anyone that succeeds in the market has an edge. What that edge is could be quite simple. Some people just are good at being very disciplined and unemotional, and that is the thing that separates them from most traders. But whatever you're going to trade in the market, it's absolutely essential that you have an edge. All right, let's get into this week's market analysis, figure out where stocks are going. We'll start off with the S&P 500. Let's take a look at the chart. You can see the rising bottoms in place. We had a little pullback for a few days, and then this past week we broke that pullback, resumed the upward trend. So that's a positive chart. May see a little bit of resistance here early next week. Remember that Monday is a half trading session, market closing at 1. And then the market's closed on Tuesday for the July 4th long weekend. Looking at the long-term weekly chart, you can see that the bottoms are rising, the buyers are in control. All right, let's move over to the Canadian market, which has been lagging the US market. But in this past week, you can see the Canadian market bounced nicely off of support. There's support there on the daily chart. We bounced off of that and had a nice little rally to the upside. We are still stuck in this sideways range. You can see it on the 3-year chart here, stuck inside the sideways trading range. And we seem to just be oscillating around inside of that. So the Canadian market certainly doesn't look as good as the US market. Let's move along to commodities, and there's the chart of gold. Let's jump to the short-term chart. This is the 1-month chart, and you can see the trend is down. So that's a bearish chart on the short term. On the long term, looking at the 3-year chart, you still have rising bottoms. We've had a weak couple of months on gold, but it's still generally in an upward trend. We're just sort of pulling back. Now, we did break the upward trend line. That's a bit of a concern. I'm not overly concerned, however, because the breakdown comes from hitting a new high in this upward trend as opposed to from a falling top. So not a great chart on gold, but not terrible in the long term. Moving along to oil. And let's look at the 1-month 60-minute chart. And you can see that it's generally sideways, quite choppy. And that choppiness tells us that there's uncertainty about oil prices. When you go to the 3-year chart, you see that it's become quiet in this trading range. So although the short-term chart has got lots of chop, it's actually fairly stable in the long term. Seems to have settled into a pattern. There is a bit of pessimism there because the tops are falling. If we break down through this floor, then I would be concerned. But until that happens, I'm not overly concerned. All right, next chart is the chart of, what are we going to look at here? The US dollar, UUP. And let's take a look at the 1 month chart there. And you can see that we have a break of the downward trend line on the short term, build of rising bottoms. So the momentum has shifted. Looking at the 3-year weekly chart, the downward trend line there was broken. The long-term upward trend line is just sort of being threatened. You see it just sort of bouncing along, but it's still holding. So actually the US dollar looks not too bad after a real strong run in 2022. It's hanging in there fairly well. Now, last week we talked about Bitcoin and the big run that it was having, and it continued to show some strength this week, although losing some of the momentum. You can see the gains this week not as good as the gains the previous week, but nonetheless, the momentum is up for Bitcoin. My short-term concern is that we're sort of at the top of this channel. If we draw the channel, something like that, that's not perfect, but you get the idea. We're getting up towards the top, so we may see it have a little bit of a pullback soon, but still no sign of a breakdown. If you look at the very short-term chart, the 1 month, say 60-minute chart, you can see that we still have rising bottoms. If this were to break, if we were to break down through this next week, then expect that little bit of a pullback to happen. Wouldn't be, breaking the chart or anything. It's just a normal pullback in an upward trend. And then finally, let's take a look at TBT, which is our interest rate chart. Go to the 1 month, 60-minute time frame, and you can see that it's been going down, but it actually broke the downward trend this past week. Still not really trending up. It's, I would say, generally just a sort of a stable chart inside that trading range. The long-term time frame, 3-year weekly, is what I'd like to look at for the long-term time frame. And well, that's not coming up right now. There it is. You can see we're just inside that trading range. You had the huge run up in interest rates. It broke there, and now we're just building this base in here and interest rates settling in. So my ratings then, US stocks bullish on both time frames, weaker on the Canadian market, neutral on both time frames. Gold long-term neutral, short-term bearish. Oil neutral on both time frames. US dollar neutral on both time frames. And Bitcoin bullish on both time frames. And then finally, interest rates neutral. Doesn't look like they're headed higher or lower. All right, now let's take a look at the day trade of the week. And this one is an example of a stock that our Active Live subscribers traded on Friday. It was a slow day on Friday because it was heading into a sort of a long weekend with Mondays being a shortened session. But nonetheless, this stock showed up as an abnormal stock. And there's your first clue. Now, my indicator, which is this little pink and yellow dots, that seeks out abnormal trading activity. And so you can see at the start of the day, it was firing that abnormal trading activity, and it shows up in the volume as that was higher. Now then it quiets down, and what you wait for is when it quiets down like that, it's like a coiled spring. And then you wait for the indicator to fire again, and you see that right there. That little pink dot is what we call a message candle, and it's driven by abnormal buying pressure coming into the stock out of a period where it was quite quiet. Now, this is a very short-term chart. This is a 1-minute chart. So the message candle indicator, again, unique to the Stockscores Active Live service, started firing right there, and that led to a big jump, really more than 100% jump from around high 60s and almost hitting, well, it did hit 140 at the high, with the sell signal coming in right about in here. So a great trade on a pretty slow day, and it all comes down to the abnormal activity that my algorithms look for. And again, those are the Stockscores indicators, the action candle, the message candle. We have others. You can learn more about that at stockscores.com. Just go to the trader training area, and you can also learn more about Active Live on my website, stockscores.com. Hope you've enjoyed this week's analysis. We'll see you again next week. Trade well.